Hello, I hope everybody's doing well as you are watching this video. We are going to work through basic skills practice number 13, which is on one-step inequalities. So keep in mind that because they're one step, that means that everything here just should require only one step to solve, and then you're going to have to graph your solution. And for all of these, the answer is both the worked out inequality along with the graph. So for number 1, which says r plus 19 is less than 33, the one step that you need here is to minus 19 to both sides to get r is less than, and 33 minus 19 is 14. You've got to have this part. That's the solve part. The graph by itself is not the answer. You have to have the statement, the correct inequality statement, along with the graph. So on the graph, this will be an open circle on 14, and if r is less than that, you shade to the left. And I'll remind you about trying to make a trick or a rule out of shading the way the arrow points. So some people look at that less than symbol and think it's an arrow that points to the left, which it kind of is. And people try to make a trick and say you can always shade that way. Well, the only way that's going to work is if the variable is in the front. So if r comes first, or whatever variable you have, if that's first in your statement, you can shade the way the arrow points. But if r would have been in the back, you'd have to shade the opposite way. So be very careful about trying to make a rule out of shading the way the arrow points. Number 2 is actually a two-step inequality, so we're just going to say skip for now. I don't want to confuse you by doing that too early. So let's go on to number 3. Negative 17 is greater than x, and if you add a negative, that's the same thing as just subtracting. So plus negative 8 is equal to just minus 8. Add 8 to both sides. Negative 17 plus 8 is negative 9, and that's greater than x. So this is part of your answer. That is going to get an open circle on negative 9. And here's where the trick, if you're trying to make one, is going to get you in trouble. Because this time, look at where the x is. The x is on the back or on the right-hand side. So you can't shade the way this arrow points because x is supposed to be less than that, and that is to the left side. You can also rewrite your answer and swap places. So x in the front, negative 9 in the back. But if you swap places on these, you have to turn your sign around for it to stay the same thing. So either of these are okay statements, and then there's the correct graph. Number 4, m plus 19 is greater or equal to 22. Subtract 19 to both sides, so m is greater than or equal to 3. That is part of your answer. Be sure you have that. And then we want a closed circle on the 3. And the variable's in the front, so it is okay to shade the way the arrow points. M has to be greater or equal to 3. That is to the right. Number 5, anytime you subtract a negative, that is the same thing as adding. So I can write this as n plus 12 is less or equal to 25. And then minus 12 to both sides. N is less or equal to, and that's 13. So we'll do a closed on 13. And then the variables in the front, so you can treat the inequality symbol like an arrow. and it'll shade left. Number 6 is r plus 16 is greater than 25, minus the 16 to both sides, and r is greater than 9. That is an open on 9, and you can shade to the right on this one. You want r to be bigger than 9, that's on the right side of 9. Okay, number 7, m plus 19 is greater than 22. Subtract 19 to both sides, and m is greater than 3. That's going to be an open circle on 3, and m is greater than that over on the right side. Number 8, negative 9 is greater than or equal to. Adding a negative is the same thing as just subtracting, so n minus 18. Add 18 to both sides, and 9 is greater or equal to n. That's closed on 9. The variable is not in the front. So if the variable's not in the front, you can't go by the direction of the sign. You actually would have to go the other way, because if n is less or equal, then that's over on the left side. Now the first 8 that we just did, all of those were one step, and we solved by either adding or subtracting. On number 1, we subtracted 19 to both sides. On number 3, we added 8 to both sides. Number 4, we minused 19 to both sides. Number 5, we minused 12 to both sides. 6, we minused 16. 7, we minused 19. And 8, we added 18. None of those had a sign switch. No sign switch, because we were adding or subtracting to solve. So that's why we had no sign switches. Now the rest of these are going to be solved with multiplication or division, so you have to be watching for sign switches. And I'll remind you that sign switches happen if the step that you take is multiplying or dividing both sides by a negative. Number 9 says n over 17 is greater than 15. Since n's being divided by 17, you've got to multiply both sides by 17. You will have a calculator. I'm actually grabbing one right now. 15 times 17 is 255. So n is greater than 255. That's open on 255, and I'll shade to the right. There was not a sign switch there because I multiplied both sides by positive 17. That's not a sign switch. Okay, number 10. Negative 170 is greater than 10x. Divide both sides by 10, because if 10x means multiplication, our job is to divide. And that's going to be a negative 17. And that's going to be x, and then do we have a sign switch? We do not have a sign switch because what we divided both sides by was positive 10. I know the 170 is negative, but I'm not dividing both sides by negative 170. I'm dividing both sides by positive 10. So there's no sign switch here. So this is the correct statement. That's going to be an open circle on negative 17. And if x is less than that, that is over to the left. Shading the way the arrow points does not work on that one because x is in the back. Only when x is in the front can you treat it like an arrow. Okay, number 11. This is our first sign switch on this page. Negative 16x is greater than negative 48. The step that this needs is division on both sides by a negative 16. That turns the sign around, and x is now less than negative 3. Open on negative 3, and if x is less, it's over here. If you don't understand about the sign switch or don't think it matters, the way you're going to likely miss number 11 is you would have the incorrect side of the graph shaded. So it will definitely mess you up if you don't know about the sign switches. Number 12, x over 16 less or equal to negative 5. Multiply both sides by 16. X is less or equal, and that is negative 80. I did not switch my sign because both sides got multiplied by positive 16, so no sign switch. Closed on negative 80, and that's a shade to the left because x is less than that. Okay, number 13, negative 8m greater or equal to 80. That's multiplication, so to solve, you would divide both sides by negative 8. That is a sign switch because the step that we took was dividing both sides by negative 8. So m is less or equal to negative 10. Closed on negative 10, and that's going to shade left. 14 is x over 2 greater or equal to 16. If x is being divided by 2, you've got to multiply by 2. I've still got a lot of you thinking that you divide 16 by 2 to get 8 for this answer, but that's not true. If x is being divided by 2, you've got to multiply by 2. So we get 32 on the other side. Sign switch here, that would be a no because we're multiplying both sides by positive 2. So no sign switch. That is closed on 32. And x is greater or equal to that. That is to the right. Okay, number 15. 10n is less or equal to negative 170. 10n means multiply, so we are going to have to divide. That's the inverse operation for multiplication. We do not switch the sign because we're dividing by positive 10. And n is less or equal to negative 17. That's closed on negative 17, and I'll be shading to the left. Okay. So some last minute thoughts about these. Be sure you watch for the sign switch. And also please understand that your answer is a bunch of stuff. The answer is the statement along with the right graph. And you have to make sure you mark the correct number. You have to be sure you get either the open or closed circle right. And then you have to be sure you shade the correct direction. So there's lots of pieces that go into having a correct answer. Rewatch this if you need to. Be sure you can handle this review, and best of luck to you on the quiz.